Welcome to the In the Boat with Ben and Rachel podcast. I am Ben,
And I'm Rachel.
and this podcast exists. I gotta say it. I when I when I introed the podcast, I just said In the Boat with Ben, but I caught myself right away.
Yeah.
Okay, this podcast exists to be an encouragement and a motivator for creators. We share stories about our circumstances and our struggles and things that we are trying and working through as creators in hopes that it will help you feel less alone and give you some fresh ideas for how you can approach creativity in your life. So, I don't know if I ever want to write down something formal
Yeah. You
that
just
we
want to wing it every time.
maybe so. No, I think I do need to eventually. So, there's a lot of stuff on my to-do list for this podcast. We have a launch event that has yet to be scheduled. Um, but we're really excited about that. We need to figure out what the prizes are going to be, and I'm pretty sure we're going to use there's a web-based app called Wonder, and Wonder makes it possible for people to. It's kind of like a Zoom call, but like a group Zoom call, and people can like drag their avatars over to another group, and so it's kind of like going to a conference and like walking around to different tables and talking to people. It's really cool, way less complicated than the way that I'm describing it. But we're gonna do that, so we're gonna have some like interaction. It's gonna be a good time. But one thing I did check off my list is the website.
You did.
If you go to intheboatpodcast.com, the website is there, it's up and running, and you can actually sign up for our email list. So
Yep.
on the website, I think I did have the launch date as April 1st,
Ah.
but that's actually not going to be the case. We're going to be pushing it back a little bit because I have a trip kind of in the beginning of April, and it's going to be when I get back from that,
Yeah.
so that there's a little bit more space. So that'll be good. But yeah. So today's topic comes from a question that we get, I would say, pretty often.
Yeah.
There's this question comes up anytime people find out that we have 6 kids, we work from home, we have creative, kind of careers. They ask, how do you do it all?
Or just how do you do it? Not even how do you do it all. It's like
Yeah,
how do you even
how are you
be
still how are you still standing? Um, and so I wanted to get into the actual details and logistics of that. There's definitely a side to answering that question that has more to do with mentality and philosophy, and maybe even things that are kind of peripheral, like our we we work out and we eat healthy foods, and that energizes us. um, there are some things that we've taught our kids that make them a little bit more flexible and
self-sufficient.
self-sufficient. um, I don't think I want to get into as much of those things, but really talk more about like the specific, like how does our schedule actually work? How do we carve out time to be creative, or even to sit down and do this podcast?
Or the
And
spaces that we have to do our work too,
yeah,
because
so
kids aren't always in school.
right.
So
No, they're not. When they're in school,
it's super easy. I'm like, how much can I get done while they're in school?
yeah,
But
it's a little bit of a trade-off, because when they're home, you you don't have to hustle as much in the morning to get everybody ready, and you don't have to worry about getting, when they come home from school, making sure they put their backpacks and stuff where they go.
yeah, there's a mental energy that you don't have to spend,
Right.
but a different mental energy that you do have to spend you know, making sure they don't tear apart the house. So,
Yeah. So I would say I kind of want to just go from like, the early years and kind of work our way through to how our approach has evolved and what it looks like today. So does that sound
yeah.
good to you? So in the beginning, no,
I don't know if I even remember the first years. It's all been a blur.
it really has been. So, and I will say that in the early years, I'm thinking back to probably about the time I would start this about the time we had three. So we were 3 going on 5.
Yeah.
Uh,
And they were like 4, 2, 1, and about to be newborn. Yeah.
Yeah. It was, but once you're outnumbered, like once you have that third, that's when the game really starts to change. So we were like, okay, we gotta figure this out. And at that point, we hadn't really decided yet, like, oh, we're gonna have this big family.
Yeah.
So we were, I think, still operating as if we were going to be a quote unquote normal size family. And I say quote unquote because there's no such thing as like a normal size family. But whatever, in this society, this society is kind of built around like
2.5 kids.
Yeah, exactly.
It might even be less than that, 2.1 or something.
So what was the family size? That was today. We went grocery shopping and we were trying to get lasagna. And you could get the
we
family
do a special,
size.
I just want to say, because you just said we eat healthy, but on Fridays we have a special, like, we eat poorly on a Friday. So.
We indulge a little bit.
We indulge.
The kids are having a birthday. The twins are having a birthday soon. So
yeah.
But we were looking at the lasagna, and they had family packs.
Family pack.
But
8 servings.
No, the family packs were 4 servings.
Oh, yeah.
The family packs were 4 servings. And so we were like, well, what's the size of the party pack? The party pack has 8 servings.
Yeah.
And
but everybody wants seconds, so we'd have to have 2 party packs.
Yeah. So we're not a family. We are a party.
We are a party everywhere we go.
Yep. So so that was kind of interesting. But anyways, back in those days, we were still kind of operating as if, oh, we're a 2 or 3 kid size family. And even then, we were starting to feel the pull on our creativity. I was working a full-time job.
I was working a full-time job.
You were working a full-time job. I had just quit my full-time job because we were going to try to do. It had been a
couple of years, actually.
Yeah, we were going to try to do the band full-time. So
while I had a full-time job.
Right. The plan was to get you out of your full-time job eventually too.
Yeah.
And it didn't pan out. But back then, we were less egalitarian in our approach. And so what I mean by that is the assumption that household responsibilities, and you can kind of throw into that category whatever you want, but like for us, that was just running the household, making sure that there were meals and groceries, the budget was taken care of, the kids had the clothes they needed, all of the things related to making sure the household ran smoothly. The assumption back then was more like, oh, Rachel's going to take care of most of that. I'm going to take care of what I can, but like I'm trying to hustle and get this thing going, even though you're working a full-time job.
And trying to take care of our children.
That broke down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I think I was sensitive enough to see the effect I was having. I was evolving in the way that I thought about how a household should be run and that kind of thing. And so we shifted, I think, pretty quickly to a more egalitarian model where it was like, no, we share the responsibilities. I need to care as much about how the kids are going to have clothes in the right size, and I need to care as much about how meals are going to happen and all of that. And so that was, I think, a big piece of what helped us earlier on establish some things that allowed us to be creative. But again, you were still working a full-time job, and so like despite,
it was still a lot.
Yeah, despite the fact that,
and I was pregnant with twins.
Yeah.
So in essence, I was not sleeping at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I ached all the time.
So you were kind of at that time squeezing your creativity into the nights and weekends.
I don't think I did anything at that time. Actually.
You did some at work.
Yeah,
too.
that's true. When I had
remember.
down moments at work, I would, take out a notebook and write a little bit, but I wasn't really getting any of the creative stuff. I mean, I worked as a managing editor, so I got to like be a little bit creative and write stories for newspapers and stuff like that, but it wasn't the creative writing. I mean, I say that newspaper writing is a different kind of writing than what I do now. And I love writing for newspaper, but I feel like what makes me come alive is creating stories from nothing,
Yeah.
Basically like, telling lies instead of telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not really like that, but
no, you're telling the truth
through
using storytelling.
Yeah. So I remember at that time just feeling like I was withering a little bit and just unfulfilled and not living out my purpose. Like I've always had a very clear idea of what I wanted to do with my life. And I just remember coming to a point where I was like, this is not what I want to do with my life. And it wasn't the family stuff, even though that was like really tough, but it was like, I mean, the job just sucked it out of me,
Mm-hmm.
because there was no extra time in between all of the family things. And then we were trying to do this band on the side, and then all of my work responsibilities, because managing editor is a big responsibility. I was putting out a newspaper, myself, and designing it and writing stories for it and collecting stories. And it was a lot. So
I would say at that time, you weren't creatively fulfilled at all.
No.
And I was, because I wasn't working full time. I was really,
you got to play on your guitar all day.
Yeah, working on the band stuff. I did still, I was working part-time for
church.
I was working part-time or full-time for church.
Mm-hmm.
During those times, at various points. And I did try to also keep some like freelance work going with web design, graphic design, eventually video production work. But I had way more room to exercise my creativity and feel that sense of creative fulfillment
mm-hmm.
than you did. And the conversation came up many times, like we need to get you out of that job, but we felt like we couldn't really afford to do that.
I mean, it paid our bills. So.
Yeah. So it wasn't until you were kind of forced out.
Yeah. Laid off, basically.
Right. So there was the job that you had
mm-hmm.
Was for a Methodist organization, and this Methodist organization has various regions and
mm-hmm.
regional offices. So your job was basically to edit and produce the newspaper for that
all of those
that region.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it was for the Southwest Texas region.
And so there was another region that merged,
mm-hmm.
and when that merge happened, there were redundancies, but it was also kind of an opportunity for the leadership to come in and say, we could stop having this one position and save some money. And that was kind of what happened. We could fold that position into this other thing. So
I applied for the other thing, and I asked for a really high salary. And of course, I did not get it.
You asked for a fair salary.
I did ask for a fair salary, but they said no.
Yeah.
So actually, I think it was less than what the man who ended up getting the position, like by about $50,000. So what I asked for was less than what. And there is why I can be an aggressive feminist.
Yeah, we had a whole conversation in the pre-show about that, and why I think that what other people might perceive as aggressive is just the reasonable expectation for anyone who experiences that kind of inequality and oppression. So
all that to say, that was kind of the impetus for us to figure out how we could both be creative in our home.
And it was also, it forced me to kind of switch roles with you in a way. It was like, you were passing the baton to me or something like that. It was kind of like, okay, it's my turn to be the person who worries about making sure we've got our bills covered. It's Rachel's turn to have some space to be creative.
Yeah.
And so that was, you had been working on a novel during your time. You'd been writing, you'd been sharing stuff.
Yeah.
But when that job went away was when it was like, okay, now I can really start focusing on my writing career.
Seeking representation and all of that. Like I had the time to actually, go about things the way I knew they needed to be done. So
yeah. And we've since then, by some miracle, we've managed, because it's been a mix of, I'll have 2 part-time jobs and be doing some freelance work on the side, or I'll have a full-time job and have a part-time job, or I'll have 1 part-time job and a bunch of freelance work on the side, or
also some books.
And some of it has been, and there were seasons of like feast or famine, and there were some seasons in there where it was like, oh, okay, we've got a pretty steady, dependable kind of thing going on. And what I really am grateful for over the past several years that we've kind of been in that situation is that I've managed to either be doing work that helped me feel fulfilled creatively, or I've had just enough space to do some creative work. And I feel like that, having the time to do that really set me up for where I am today, which is I have an amazing, flexible, remote, full-time job with benefits, and doing work that I love for people who I really care about and want to help and support. And in addition to that, I still have some time to do stuff like this and make videos and do creative work. So it really is great right now, but it was a struggle for a long time.
It really was, yeah. And especially when the kids were young too, they needed a lot more from us. And so that was very, it was fulfilling, but it was also very draining, where I know for myself, I often felt like the lifeblood of me was just being sucked out by all of the needs of our children. And so it was, the way that we set things up early on was that 3 days a week, I was responsible for the kids in the morning. And then once 12:30 came around, you would take over. And then the other 2 days of the work week, we switched, where I had the afternoon and you had the morning. And so what that allowed me to do is feel like I could give give of myself the way I felt like I needed to give to my children. But then once 12:30 hit, I knew that I could just like go into my room and be by myself,
Mm-hmm.
and that could foster creativity as well.
Well, and I want to back up a little bit first too to talk about how one of the things we decided to do early on was, and this was not just for our own sanity, but it was also kind of what we were reading about and learning about child development and that kind of thing would be the healthiest, most secure kind of environment for a child is one that has some solid structure and that was predictable. And so we built a really solid routine, mornings,
Lunchtime.
lunch times, nap times, evening routine, and that that structure was for them, but it was also for us. And without starting that way, if you don't start that way, later on, you're going to have a really hard time
Yeah, it is tough.
getting a kid to fall into a rhythm. You're going to have a harder time than if you start them out that way. And so I think because we started them out that way, because that was all they knew was that rhythm and that routine. It really made it a lot easier when it came time for us to decide, okay, like how do we want to portion out our time in the framework of this routine that we've already established with the kids. And so that's where this idea came in for having 3 days a week. So I don't know, I feel like it started out as a different set of days, but what it
Yeah,
is
it probably
today is
was. Yeah.
Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays.
I get everybody ready for school.
Yeah, you were responsible for all the morning stuff, and then 12 o'clock came around and we tag team.
It was 12:30.
Or yeah, 12:30, and then you had the rest of the afternoon, and then on Wednesdays and Fridays, I'm the one who gets everybody up and gets everybody ready for school, or in the summer.
Yeah.
We get them up and we, make sure they're occupied and not killing each other.
And it's funny too, because they actually look forward to our mornings for different reasons, because they're like, ooh, daddy's in charge tomorrow, so he's going to make oatmeal. But we're probably going to be a little bit later to school because mama's the punctual one.
Right. Yeah.
So it's great.
Yeah. I'm really curious. Like, I'll be really curious to have conversations with them when they're parents about their experience as children, kind of having that back and forth, because there's a form of consistency, but there's also a form of inconsistency there, because like every morning is a little bit different because of that. So, and I think because I was the one who was primarily responsible for like making the money and stuff, I was given the mornings, those 3 mornings a week. I was given
more time.
Yeah, I was given a little bit more time. But it's still, that 12:30 handoff. And the thing that works really well for us there too, this comes back to like the kids' schedules, is they have lunch every day at 11:30, between 11:30 and noon, and right after lunch they've always either had nap time or quiet time. And I want to talk about that. Like, I want to talk about the nap time and the quiet time thing, because I think that's probably, I don't know, like now that I think about it, I feel like that's maybe the biggest part of what has made it such a success.
Yeah.
Because even though we're handing off, at 12:30, that's in the middle of that nap time and quiet time. So it's almost like we've got this
window of
it's like I'm responsible for the kids, but they're good. Like they're not
Yeah, because
not
they're kind of trained. And I think, I mean, I was very diligent about nap time because I knew kids when they were young needed sleep, and then, you know, as they get older, they no longer sleep, even though we always tell them even a 30-minute nap would be good for you. But we changed it to quiet time because that is the hottest part of the day. And in a
Mhm.
Texas summer, it's very hot outside. And I always told them you have to wear sunscreen, and they didn't want to wear sunscreen. And so I was like, well, you have to stay inside the house until, you know, this time. And so it was a natural kind of evolution from nap time to quiet time because they needed to be inside and doing things. And so they have pre-approved activities where, you know, they can color, they can draw, they can write, they can read. And so it's just all of these quiet activities that also
Sometimes,
foster their creativity.
yeah, sometimes they can play board games.
Sometimes, not usually on my shift, but
If they don't
Daddy lets them do it.
if
And
they don't break out into fighting.
yeah. But, you know, in the summertime when they're home and they're having quiet time every day, I actually have writing prompts for them to write in journals and things like that, just to keep them occupied. And we have summer reading lists, which, I mean, I could even share some of those with everybody as we get closer to summer.
Yeah, we'll have to do that. That would be really cool. Yeah, so when they were really little, that started out as nap time.
Mm-hmm.
And as they got older and naps weren't quite as necessary, the quiet time thing, I think, in addition to, like, it gets them out of the sun, but it also breaks up their day because
Mm-hmm.
we would send them outside, like when they're home from school. That's one of the things that is helpful because, like,
They play
there's
outside a lot.
always stuff to keep up with in the house, and then, you know, like, I still have work, you still have writing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they're home, there are certain things that I can do for my job that I can do while the kids are, you know, outside playing. And if they need to come in and ask me a question or whatever, and I know the difference between, like, oh, this is something I can do while I'm on duty, and these are things that if I try to do while I'm on duty, I'm going to get frustrated, or, you know, they're not going to get. So
Mm-hmm.
that's been a big part of it too, is like understanding the different kinds of work that you can do um, while you're in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And then so the kids are playing outside like basically all morning, come in and have lunch, and then they've got this time that they can be inside, and it kind of breaks up the day. And then when quiet time is over, they're usually like, oh, I'm ready to go back outside, and
Yeah.
they'll play outside again for the rest of the afternoon. So I think that's another piece of it. And then as the older ones now, you know, we don't force them to have quiet time. I say force. I mean, we do. The younger ones, it's like, no, you have to have
Yeah.
quiet time. But the older ones, I can't remember, but at some point we started giving them the option. But they still,
Yeah.
during that
they'll sit and
time,
read and
yeah, that's also when their screen time starts. So like they're about the time they're old enough not to have quiet time anymore, they're also old enough to have a little bit of screen time. So they'll usually do that then, and then they'll spend a couple of hours reading, and then they might decide to go out and play, you know,
Yeah.
still, and do some stuff. But I feel like that's worked extremely well, and it's also expanded because of how that overlaps, you know, the handoff. I feel like that's
Mm-hmm.
expanded the time that each of us has
Mm-hmm.
to focus on our work.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, I don't know if there's much more to it than that.
I think it's just building systems into things, and um, kids just fall very naturally into routine and schedule. And as much as, you know, we talked about it last week, can you be overscheduled? But I think for kids, it means predictability, and it means
Mm-hmm.
safety for them. And so I mean, the nights that we are late on doing after dinner chores, after which time we spend in our in our home library reading. Usually I'll read from a chapter book and you'll read a picture book, and they miss it. You know, they're like, oh, we're not doing this tonight because we have to cut it out in order to get everybody to bed on time or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it just means a measure of, you know, predictability for them. And that's really good. Especially we have some neurodiverse children, and it's especially important for them to know what's coming and to know what's next. So that kind of dictated some of that as well. And I just happen to be a very routine kind of person. I do the same things every night for my, you know, go to bed routine. So
yeah,
I guess you could call it boring, but
no.
Go wash your face, put your chapstick on.
That's not boring. That just sounds lovely. I will say that the other what makes this so effective also is that when I'm in charge and you're having your work time, the kids understand just through repetition that like when there's a parent that's not in charge, even if they come downstairs or whatever, like they're not in charge of any of the decisions. And because that, you know, that takes making decisions about, or like whether or not kids want permission for something, or
it's mental energy,
having to get onto them for some behavior. It's mental energy. And so we've really helped them understand. And, you know, there's still,
I still have intruders. I had 2 yesterday. So
but for the most part, we can go into our workspaces when it's our time to have that work time and feel very confident that we're going to be able to focus and not be interrupted. And that I think is essential for creative work. I mean, you've got to have those spaces where like you just know nothing is going to come in and steal your attention and steal your focus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I will say too that it, you had mentioned at the very beginning the egalitarian share that we have in our home. And it really is, you know, it's not like I'm the only one who does these certain things and you just, you know, get to be a man or whatever. Like, you are very good about sharing the household duties as well. So I think that has, for me at least, that's opened up time and space in my brain to be able to be creative. I appreciate that. So,
well, and you know, when you're thinking about, because even when you're not on duty, when you're trying to think about all of the things that need to happen, like the laundry and food preparation and dishes and groceries and kids' schedules and activities and that kind of thing, like all of those things, they don't just leave your brain, you know, and so if you're the person who's responsible for them and things break down, or like you feel like things will break down if you don't think about them and have a plan for them, that takes away from your ability to focus and be creative. And so that's, you know, I think it's still something, to be honest, it's still something that I am working on. Is I wouldn't say I grew up in homes that weren't egalitarian, but I did learn, like I picked up on these notes of a more patriarchal structure in the home, and that it wasn't really for the man of the house to concern himself with certain things. And again, I wasn't taught that directly. There, you know, nobody was like, okay, so Ben, when you're it was really
That's
just something you kind of learn in society, if you are in
It's what you absorb.
certain religious cultures, you learn that. It's it's something you observe, and so uh, I want to be careful not to like mischaracterize how I was raised or something like that, but because of that, I have to be intentional about looking for those things, and because you don't often, it's less of a like, oh, here, Ben, here's something I need you to do, or I need you to think about, or I
I
need
just
you to take
complain about
over.
it.
You just complain. Um, if if Rachel starts to get grumpy, I'm like, I know
Maybe
I've
I need to
learned.
step up a little.
Yeah, I've learned to ask, what am I not doing that I should be doing now? No,
That sounds terrible.
no, it's not that way.
Making me.
No, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like it's really just
I'm not great at asking for help anyway, but there are times when I'll say something like, I really don't like being the only one who does this.
yeah. So
I'm not a great communicator when it comes to like, hashing these things out, but
yeah. Man, okay, so as far as answering the question of like how do you do this? I think we've done a pretty good job talking about some of the logistical things, but I think that this really is a big piece of it too, because if you're in a partnership with someone, um, and you share household or you have a household together, you have children together, whatever that looks like, you do need to be on the same page. And maybe you're in a relationship where you've never asked the question, or it's never come up. There's always been kind of this assumption that, oh, this person's responsible for these things and I'm responsible for the other things, and so we didn't have those conversations, not seriously. Like they were in some workbook that we did, I'm sure.
probably.
But we didn't really seriously have those conversations until a little bit later. So if you haven't had those conversations, and because you might learn some things that you didn't know, and there may be some opportunities there to either step up or offload some of the things that you feel like you've been carrying by yourself. And it may be, I think in most cases it may be one of those things where if you are the person like Rachel was, I think, who for a long time carried more than she should have, it's not necessarily that your partner wouldn't be willing to carry those things, but maybe just doesn't know to ask, or doesn't have a way of recognizing that, and that having that conversation could be the thing that opens their eyes to, oh yeah, that isn't cool. I should be helping you with that. So I would encourage you to do that. I'm going to go ahead and I want to keep talking about this subject and go a little bit deeper into it, but we're going to do that in the after show. So
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and sign us out. Do you have any more thoughts?
I don't think so.
Okay. I'm sorry I made you cry.
Hey,
No, you're
you're
good.
gonna make me have wrinkles.
No, I'm not. Okay.
I already have wrinkles. 20 years with you. Just kidding.
Because I make you laugh. That's what it is.
It's all
because
laugh lines.
it's all laugh lines. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening today. If you like this show and you want to help us out, or you want to hear more episodes or whatever, you can go to intheboatpodcast.com. You can sign up for our newsletter there. Sign up for our newsletter because we're going to let you know. Right now we're in pre-launch. If you're listening to this after we've launched, that's already, happened and stuff, but we're going to let you know when we do our launch party. We're going to let you know about any other kind of special events we do with the podcast. We'll let you know when new episodes come out, that kind of thing. We have some fun plans for what we might do with this podcast in the future. And so if you want to know about those things, sign up for our newsletter, In the Boat with Ben. In the Boat Podcast. It's not In the Boat with Ben and Rachel. InTheBoatPodcast.com. Rachel, if people want to find you online, where can they go?
RachelTolson.com.
And you can find me at BenTolson.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yep.
All right. So, egalitarianism. I feel like I did a pretty good job of characterizing how I came to kind of the approach that I did. But it also takes two to tango, and I'm curious. So when I was describing it, I was talking about like I was in very deeply involved in religious culture, primarily Baptist, which does teach a lot of the teachings kind of place the man as the head of the household.
It's very patriarchal.
Yeah, it places the man as the head of the household, and it's not. I think
woman
these
must
days
submit to her husband.
I think these days it's not, and even then when I was a kid, it wasn't as explicitly like the wife should stay home and take care of all the home. Like it wasn't.
I think it depends on the church.
It depends on the church. I'm just saying for me.
Yeah. Oh. Okay.
So for me, those weren't the kind of messages I was getting, but there were some subtle undertones of that in the religious culture that I came up in the households that I grew up in. That was kind of the structure. There was sharing of responsibility, but there were certain things that the men did, and there were certain things that the women did, and so those were kind of the things that influenced my perception and my expectation of what a household would look like, and the kind of responsibilities that I would have. But I'm curious to hear about your experiences and like what were the things that you learned and expected when we first got married.
I mean, I grew up in the same traditions you did, and and I've written about a lot of this. I don't know that I've published a lot of it, but it's probably my number one problem that I have with the church as it exists today, is that I am no secondary citizen, and that's kind of what I grew up feeling like. And so I didn't feel like I could complain or ask for help on certain things, or even pursue the things that I wanted to pursue, because that was not my right as a woman. And so there's a lot of...
Were there specific messages or teachings that that gave you that message, or was it something that was a little bit more subtle but
I think it depended on the church. My childhood church was probably a little more subtle. The places that I got involved with when I was in college, and probably like at the first part of our marriage and stuff, and some of the churches we went to, I remember there being a pastor who was like, well, we want your husband on the worship team so that you can stay home and homeschool your children. And I was like, that is not my vision for my life. Like, I am not a homeschooling kind of person. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It just was not my vision for my life. But I think a lot of it was subtle, but I do remember there being certain pieces where I specifically remember one, because I was always a very ambitious, I wanted to do great things. And that's just the way I was born. I would tell people when I was like 3 years old, I'm going to be a writer and I'm going to be famous. And not that, fame is all, it's not what I chase. But I do remember there being a specific experience that I've had to like work through multiple times where there was, I don't know if it was a pastor or a youth pastor or somebody, when I would share what my dreams were for my future, he took it back to the curse and how Eve, I can't remember the specific language around it, but it was like, you will want what your husband has. And he said, he interpreted that as being the job and the fame and the doing great things and the dream. And that's like, it made me feel ashamed to even want to be great.
Yeah. There are a lot of problematic,
interpretations.
There's a lot of problematic theology.
Yeah.
That comes from the Genesis story.
Interpretation, yeah.
And
maybe
from,
she ate the apple because she wanted to be wise. I'm just kidding.
Well,
no, I'm not kidding, but
no,
I shouldn't say that on the
so
Sorry,
that's,
go ahead.
yeah, we definitely don't want to like dish on religion and stuff, but just acknowledge, like, I think it's important to acknowledge where some of these ideas come from. And religion is, that's a piece of it, but it's also in society. It was in, for me, it was in society. It was in
TV shows.
TV shows and movies.
Yeah, like everything that you saw. I mean, there were a few you could count probably on your hands in the 80s and 90s. And the 90s were really the ones I remember because that's when I was, coming into middle school and high school and learning more about who I was going to be. But I mean, it was very patriarchal stuff, We've watched The Goonies with the boys, which is one of my favorite movies, but there are certain lines in that I'm like, I'll pause and I'm like, okay, boys.
We have to talk about this.
Talk about this. So, yeah.
Yeah. And in some ways, it was in earlier years when it was more blatant, it's a lot easier to deal with because it's like, oh yeah, that's blatantly, I think it's that way with a lot of issues nowadays. I think the more subtle it becomes, the more difficult it is to deal with, and the easier it is for people who want to defend.
They just dismiss, yeah.
Yeah, they want to defend that way of thinking, and so it's like, well, no, that's why are you? It's not like I'm out here.
Yeah.
Whatever excuse they give. So.
Yeah.
So.
I think, and there are times that I've written. I used to write for the HuffPost, and I remember actually talking about this very specific thing where you and I, break up our days and stuff. And I mean, the amount of hate that I got from like commenters about how, I mean, the women even would say, well, you're not doing your duty as a mom and a wife. And then the men would come and be like, she probably spends all his money, even though I was the one with the full-time job. And it's just like, you hear enough of those things and it's awful,
Yeah. I love my full-time job. And I love the work I do. But my dream is to have a partner in you specifically. My dream really is for you to become so, famous with your books that I don't have to work unless I choose to, and I can just do whatever creative thing I feel like that day.
You're just you're still holding out for that.
It's going to happen. I believe it. So basically you would be, as I think the term is, my sugar mama. So that's very untraditional. No. I think the biggest challenge really is just when you grow up learning to think a certain way and learning to see things a certain way, having to reprogram that really does it takes some effort, and it takes some intentionality. And even recently, I think this has been within the past month, I finally caught on that, like, every Sunday, in addition to, like, we would clean our house together and stuff, that was something we shared responsibilities for. But like Sunday, when I thought of Sundays, I was like, oh, I can take it easy. I don't have anything to do. And then I kept hearing you complain about having to cut up vegetables and stuff, because the boys have vegetables for their lunches throughout the week. And we would fill up, like Rachel would fill up 3 full containers, or 2 full containers of vegetables.
And chop and prepare all of the salad for the week. And
yeah. And so it finally occurred to me one day when you were complaining about it, I was like, there's no reason I can't help with that.
Yeah.
Like
and now it takes half the time.
And
So
it's
wonderful.
it's really looking at anything like that, because, like, there's no reason I can't figure out what size clothes the boys need to be in, and have a plan, and come up with a plan for when we're going to get those clothes. There's no reason I can't, whatever it is. Instead of looking at something and thinking, oh, that's not my job. I think a big one that's kind of, this is where it gets really sneaky, is there are things that society teaches us. Oh, these are things that they're not in men's wheelhouse. Like, that's women are just more,
They're made for that.
yeah, they're better designed for those tasks. That's baloney.
It is.
It's
yeah.
just baloney. It is.
Well, it's the same way that, we're told that men are designed for certain tasks, like, math and all of the, it's so.
The only time something like that has been true, these are like the 2 times that I can think of specifically.
I don't take out the trash.
But it's not because you can't.
Right. It's because I don't want to.
Yeah, but it's not because you're a woman.
Mm-hmm.
There are other people who are in the house with you who are more willing to do that.
Yeah.
None of us is more qualified than you would be to take out the trash. It's just,
Yeah.
that's a thing. So opening jars.
I do a pretty good job at that, though, most times. No, I have a method, though. You just think I'm going to mess it up.
No, you've asked me, though.
Yeah, I have asked you a few times.
And I do have a method.
Yeah.
I use the knife on the edge, and I hit, like,
I just bang it against the counter.
Yeah, but when that doesn't work, so that, and then reaching things that are on high shelves.
Yeah. Because you're just a little bit taller than. You have longer arms. That's what
I
it
have
is.
much longer arms.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, folks. Just about anything else, either one of us is equally qualified to do in this household. Mm-hmm. Every justification we might have for whether that's something that every justification that we have that's gender based is a fabrication.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I couldn't breastfeed the children. No, but so there are things that, like, personality wise, that can get kind of sneaky too, though, because it's like, oh, women tend to have these kinds of personalities and men tend to have these kinds of personalities.
I feel like you and I break that mold, though. It's almost like we're reversed.
Well, I don't know. I think because I've seen enough examples of what I think I remember the most is, like, oh, women are more detail oriented and men are more like big thinkers, dreamers, come up with, like,
yeah.
But
and that's not a gender thing anyway.
I think that is true about,
yeah,
you are the more detail oriented one. But that doesn't mean I'm not capable of dealing with
Right.
details, and that doesn't mean that you're not capable of coming up with big plans. It just means that, you know, the easier way for us to think happens to fall into those categories. But in other couples, it's
Yeah.
switched. There are some couples where like both partners are big dreamers,
Mm-hmm.
or both partners are very detail oriented. And those are the people who always have clean homes 100% of the time. Don't look behind us. So anyway, all that to say, I've learned to be suspicious of any thought that I have that tells me, oh, that's something that is like Rachel's job,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and vice versa. And it's also caused me to be a little bit more intentional about looking for those opportunities, not to like take on as much responsibility as I can and like take everything off of your plate, but just, you know, and this is, I think, what it really all comes down to is, you know, that I want things to be as equal as possible. We're not going to achieve like a perfect
Mm-hmm.
balance where like we both have an equal share of the responsibilities and that kind of thing. But you know that I'm trying to do that, and I know that you're trying to do that. You know that I care about you having the space and the focus to create, and I know that you care about that for me. And so I think because we believe that about one another, it makes it a lot easier not to feel hung up on the day in, day out stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I would say too that in different seasons, things shift a little, you know?
Oh, for sure.
So
yeah.
there are times that we ebb and flow with our responsibilities and stuff. And I feel like that's just as it should be.
Yep. All right. We've gone
Way
quite
over.
a bit over what we originally set aside for this, but it was a good conversation. I like talking about this stuff too.
Yeah.
So, all right. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hi, Mom. Yeah, so in the Ben with Rachel in the boat. They call that a Freudian slip.
Oh.
In the boat with Rachel and Ben, it doesn't flow off the tongue quite the same
Yeah.
way.
I think we're used to just saying Ben and Rachel.
But
Rachel,
yeah,
Rachel
I like
and Ben.
I
Rachel
like
and
that idea of play into each other's. That's, you know, that's been kind of, I feel like that's been kind of the deal, is like we admire the things in the other person that maybe we personally tend to doesn't come as easily to us or whatever.
I mean, I wouldn't say I admire that you leave your clothes all over the floor.
That's
but
not what that's not what I'm talking about.
I'm just kidding.
So
I tripped over your shoes this morning. It's okay.
I can't think of anything I can complain about. I needed to work a little bit later this morning than, and you were like ready to go on time. And that was frustrating for me because I needed like 5 extra minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I needed us to leave late, and you're always on time. You're just too dependable.
Oh gosh.
Now that's my complaint. All right. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next time.